check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, check one.
Let me go get her.
Okay, we were waiting for sound, and it appears that we now have sound. So if I can call this meeting to order at 1:06, and we'll begin with an opening prayer by the senior minister.
Now I'm on. Just had to wait. Thank you, Reverend Johanna. Let's give her a hand as she's running around taking care of all kinds of things. And so good to have all of you here. Thank you for your interest, and let's take a deep breath. And in this moment, we know the presence of Spirit. We know the presence of understanding, the presence of compassion. We open ourselves to work on our shadow side. As we heard this morning, all of us in this world, in this spiritual community, each individually are called to do our shadow work. to embrace our shadow, to embrace those parts of ourselves that we've denied existed, and to integrate that so that we are whole, so we are not projecting onto one another. We stand in the truth, we stand courageously and in love, and we give thanks, and so it is. Amen.
Did you want to spend a few minutes on a senior minister's report, or do you want to bypass that?
It'll be very, very brief. So my final services will be February 10th and February 17th. I'll be gone next Sunday, but that's because I'm going to the mainland, see family before I start at Unity in Marin. And also we have a grandchild being born, so we want to be there for that. Hey! And in our family, there's a proclivity of boys, and so we get to have a girl being born as the news. Yeah. And so anyway, this coming Sunday, Reverend Johanna is scheduled to speak. And of course, after I'm gone, I won't be the decision maker, but I know that there are some speakers available that I've talked to about the 24th and also March 3rd, and I let the board know who those speakers are. And so, it's wonderful. I love you. I hold you all in my heart. I carry you with me. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of you and for the opportunity of being here. It was not a mistake. It was all in divine order. I'm very glad that I was here. And you will always be in my prayers and in my heart. Aloha. Thank you.
Okay, as you can probably tell by looking at the agenda, it's very abbreviated to give as much time as possible to a board talk. So I have asked the treasurer to give a very abbreviated report, and she will not take questions. So if you have questions, you can talk to her afterwards so that we keep her report short. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Bonita has been passing out copies of today's report. Anybody who needs one? The very able Bonita Bethards has been trying to make sure everybody gets one, but she may still have to make more copies with as many hands as I see up. So what you will have when you get the report, the front page is kind of the highlights page that I'm going to summarize, and then attached to that is on the back of the first page is the balance sheet that states our assets, liabilities, and net assets as of December 31st, 2018. And I should say these are the preliminary unaudited version as we want to go through for the next month and determine if there are other accruals or adjustments that need to be recorded. When we look on over to the second page, you'll see the month of December, exactly what came in the way of donations and other income and what we spent during the month of December. And at the bottom where it says other revenues and expenses, that tells you about what's happening with our restricted donations that come in and how those are being spent. On the very back page, you see the year-to-date, the summary totals for each account for the 12 months of 2018. So as you go through all that, and after the meeting, if you do have any questions you'd like to discuss, I'll be more than happy to stay and discuss them with you. But the summary for the month of December is that our revenue, the money coming in, exceeded our expenses by $8,083 for the months. So yes, and that deserves a hand clap because that is an operating surplus for the month of December, and we did have our donations not above budget, but above what we were actually projecting for the month of December. So that gave us that additional surplus for that month. to make up for some of the months that were not quite that good. At the end of the year, the unrestricted cash, that's what we use for our operating expenses, had a balance of $13,570. So that's a little bit tight in terms of an operating reserve, but that's what we want to work on building over the next year. When you look at the information for the entire year of 2018, you will see that there was an operating deficit for the year, meaning our expenses were more than our income, using up our operating reserve to some extent, and that amount was $19,173. The donations were $250,187 during this past 12-month period, which was a little less than we had projected in our budget. So we're taking that into account in the break-even budget that the board has adopted for this next year. We did have some special events, and I want to give special credit to everyone who worked on and attended our special events. Our fundraising committee was very diligent about it, and so those events, such as the great 81st anniversary celebration, as well as the Carl Anthony concert and the silent auctions that we held, those events brought in the income more than expenses, so net bottom line income of $6,289. And we're looking to continue and build on that effort during the next year. In addition to all of that, during this past year of 2018, the Action Auction program continued in full force, and we completed some projects. We completed the rain gutter replacement, we completed the audio-visual improvements, and several other smaller projects, and moved on towards our upgrade of our computer systems. And during the year for those Action Auction projects, you contributed $25,661. So thank you all for making that happen in 2018. Those are the highlights for the church operations. We have been a little bit slower in getting our school operations reported, and so the information I have presented on the front page is a summary of the most recent financial statements available for the Unity School operation, and it does show, and these are as of October, and it does show that for the first 10 months of the year, the school operation not only did a great job of serving our students, but also generated net income after all expenses of $188,800, and has financial resources, meaning money in the bank and in certificates of deposit, totaling $1.4 million. So it is a very prosperous operation. And that concludes my presentation for the day, as we have been asked to move through this information. And again, if there's anything here you'd like to discuss, I'll be available after the meeting to talk with you. Thank you so much, and blessings.
Okay, we're now going to go into board talk, and this is going to be a question and answer period from the members to the board. We're going to start with a petition that was circulating, and is Salim here? Where's Salim? Thank you. I want to thank Salim. He actually wrote to the board and said there is a petition circulating. Is there any possibility we can just have this meeting and go through these questions? So that is the impetus of rearranging the agenda and making sure that there's time for this discussion, and we will start with those questions. And I have asked Margie Hyatt to be the moderator of that discussion. And do you need microphone runners or anything like that? We may need some volunteers, or you can have them come up. Okay. Okay. So with that, now do you want me to start with opening remarks, or do you want to or start with your prayer? Okay. It has been suggested that we begin with an opening remarks to sort of set the tone, as was done Tuesday last. And I'm not really quite sure exactly what to say, so I'll just let Spirit flow through me and we'll see what happens. I'm personally very, very proud of the board that we have. It is an incredibly hardworking board. It is a board of independent thinkers. We express our thoughts. We listen mutually with respect to each other's thoughts. And many times we find that our collective wisdom was greater than our individual thoughts. That's not a surprise. What has been a particular point of pride, if that's appropriate for me to say it that way, is that no one in this year has resigned. And as you know, our recent history has been dotted with people resigned or people being removed. And I think part of the reason that happened is, and if this sounds like I'm gloating, then maybe I am, part of it is, I don't want to hear about resignations or removal. These representatives were elected by you. They were elected for 3-year terms. I expect them as president, and I'll only be in this position a couple of months, but I expect them to complete those 3-year terms. And I expect that I must do my best to work with all of them and to set a tone where they all feel they can flourish. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that's the tone I've tried to set. I try to call on people in order. I try to make sure that people are listened to. And what pleases me most from this setting, what I take away as the things that I might have contributed to, and they may argue differently, but what I see and I'm personally pleased about are things like Debbie Catania and Marcia taking on that they will lead the membership renewal effort. Thomas Gallagher coming in and working very hard with the school and the facilities and getting the amount of money the cost allocation improved. Seeing Jan come in and saying, I think I can help. Let me do a board training each session. Then she later on proposes new rules so that we can have more efficient and more communications between the boards. It's that kind of thing makes me pleased that we've created an environment amongst ourselves that not only encourages participation, but encourages increased involvement and increased leadership. So that's, I guess, are my opening remarks, and we'll just take it from there. Margie, would you like to lead us in prayer?
Thank you, Joanne and the board, for asking me to moderate this afternoon's session. I wholeheartedly believe that an open exchange of information is the first place to begin healing in this community. And so I'm going to ask you to listen with your heart and communicate from that space today. And we'll prepare for that reality with a short meditation. I invite you to breathe deeply and exhale completely. And as you continue another 2 deep breaths in and complete exhalations, I invite you to imagine that breath is passing through your heart. That you are breathing with the center of your being, the center of God in you this afternoon. And then let your breath fall into a normal pattern, still thinking of it as breathing in and out through the filter of your heart, the filter of God in you. And now bring to mind an image that makes you feel joyful, that your whole being radiates with joy, or an image or a person or a situation that instills deep gratitude in you. Either one of those. Hold that image. Be aware of it in your consciousness. See it in your mind's eye. Hold it in your heart as you continue to breathe in and out as if your heart were the vehicle of your breath. And as we do this, we bring our consciousness and our heart energy in alignment. If you know what a cosine wave is, you are now creating that energy within your being, which means a smooth function, up and down. No jagged edges, no ripples, no rattles, no bumps and grinds. Just the smooth presence of your consciousness aligned with the mind of God. And from this place, I invite you to listen with your heart. Fully listen to each speaker. Not rushing in your mind to figure out what your thoughts might be in response or how you want to have your turn at the mic and what you'd ask and what you'd say, but fully listen. And then when we do speak, to speak from the place of God present in us, alive, active, filling us with compassion, filling us with awareness. For this work this afternoon, we'll have plenty of opportunity to see the shadow present I rather expect. And more importantly, we'll have an opportunity to say, thank you for that inner voice. But I choose to speak from the space of love. I choose to hear through the filter of love today. For here is a truth I think exists in this community, that every person in this room desires that Unity Church of Hawaii answer its call to be the light in this world. That we collectively answer the call to do that in wholeness, in love, in compassion. Centered in God, we elevate consciousness first in ourselves so that indeed we may impact global consciousness. Take a breath through your heart. Exhale completely. And we begin. And so it is. Madam President, how is the flow this afternoon taking place? I didn't bring a printed copy. Do you want? Okay. Thank you. All right. The board was given a list of questions, and so we will begin with those from Salim, and I believe a group of people had assembled these. Glasses work so I can see you, not so well with the printed paper. The first question they posed to the board is, what was the reason for the hostile relation which prevailed between the board and Reverend Tim? And I understand, Jan, you're going to address this.
This is actually a pretty complex question. Sorry. This is actually a pretty complex question. One, because the board evolves. When you ask about the relationship between the board and the minister, we're talking about, first of all, a new board that assembled shortly before Reverend Tim arrived, which was not the board that hired him. Sorry. Which it hadn't occurred to me until Reverend Tim mentioned it recently. And I was like, wow, one group of people hired him, and then he came here and had to work with a different group of people. Wow, that's a rough way to start. Since that time, there have been people who have resigned from the board, who have left the board for whatever reasons, and have been replaced by appointment. And then there have been people who were elected the following year, a couple people who went off the board, one reelected. That's when I became part of the board. So it's not a constant, it's not a thing that has had a relationship with Reverend Tim. It's a bunch of people who've had different relationships with him. Having said that, the board is a thing because it's a part of this system called Unity Church of Hawaii. It's a system that has been in existence for over 80 years and has gone through many versions of boards and ministers and many versions of relationships between boards and ministers, but we've had a recurring pattern of conflict. And so I see what's been happening as more of the same. To some extent, to a large extent. I think the reason for the relationship between the board and the minister being as it has been is because we are all drawn into roles in the system, and that for anything to change, the entire system will have to change. Currently, the system requires conflict. We need to change that. My perception, and admittedly, when I came on the board, I was expecting a good deal more turmoil than I experienced. So clearly there are things I was not present for. But what I experienced was not hostility, but it was not a safe place. I didn't feel safe. I don't see how the minister could have felt safe. People have great difficulty hearing each other. Statements are repeated with different interpretations. In a recent meeting, I counted 4 within a space of a few minutes. One statement changed 4 different times as people discussed it. Another thing that happens is that motives are attributed to people, attributed to others' actions. Person does an action, and then people decide why they think that person did that thing without ever asking. That can lead to a lot of misunderstanding, and there has been a lot of misunderstanding. I personally did not know about many of the incidents that Reverend Tim shared in the meeting that we had until maybe, 2 or 3 months ago, whereas they clearly had happened more than a year before that. So what do you do about systemic conflict? Problems cannot be solved by the same level of thinking or consciousness that created them. That means that we need a change in consciousness and a new level of thinking in order for there to be change. You can say this person did this and that person did that, But I can assure you that if that person is removed, someone will take their place. I would also like everyone to remember that the board is elected by the congregation and therefore is, in many ways, a reflection of the congregation. Now, I know that I have voted for members of the board who I did not know, and that's my fault, and that's part of the problem, isn't it? And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, could we have a mic here?
Jen, I think I understood earlier that you were going to be the one that trains the board. Is that right? Is that you?
Not really. What I'm doing at this point is I'm doing a little, 2 to 5 minute training at the beginning of a board meeting. My thought being that if people hear these things immediately before interacting, that they will be more likely to practice them, and things that are practiced are more likely to be remembered. We did have someone come in December and work with the board one Saturday morning. I did arrange that. And we are now looking at working with Unity Worldwide Ministries. I mean, we have begun the process of working with Unity Worldwide Ministries for training and dealing with some of our history and conflict.
What about what we used to do, where when we did when we were on the board, there used to be a survey, the DISC survey, that we used to get people understanding who other people were by preference and what their behaviors were about. Was any of that done with the new board as they came in, or with you as you joined the board?
No.
Okay.
It was.
Sounds like somebody is going to say something over here. What?
It was done before I was on the board, yes.
Okay, so the main board that's in there now, Ricky, did the DISC. Okay. How is it applied?
In the sense that would be 7 of the people out of 10.
Okay.
Or, no, sorry, that would be 8 out of 10.
My question then would be, how often is that revisited in board meetings? So that you have to go back and reconnect with the information, because nobody can carry that in their heads that well from meeting to meeting. And it might be a place to rethink and go back to more regularly, so that maybe not every meeting, but maybe every 2 or 3 meetings, and get back to it. So that we have to remember that motive that you're concerned about being attributed, I don't understand it because I didn't remember that it was in the DISC a little differently. So that motive becomes an issue of...
Chip, excuse me. For those in the room not familiar, would you briefly define what DISC is?
Yeah, it's a behavioral. Thank you, Margie. To keep it simple, it's a behavioral instrument that's been researched and valid and reliable, that gives us an idea of people's preferences for how they behave in various situations. And it's been a while since I've actually been a part of that, so I don't remember a lot of the details to it. But essentially, it gives us a feedback to ourselves, first of all, about what are my preferences for how I get along with other people. And it's used in leadership and so on and so forth in different organizations. It's one of many, actually. Ricky can tell you in HR that we use and Jack can too, the Myers-Briggs as well, a type indicator. So my question is that really goes to how much preparation was done to be able to keep the unit in a team-style operation with the respect that it needs to take into play, and not assume we know somebody's motives. If that's not being done regularly, you wasted your money and time on it from a professional point of view, consulting point of view. That
was done before I was on the board, I've heard it referred to on one occasion. I myself took the questionnaire independently because I felt like it after it was referred to. But no, we haven't gone back over that. And I think you have a good point. But when I talked about attributing motives, I was not entirely talking about within the board. I was talking about, people with the school and, anybody who comes along and needs to be interacted with.
You can't speak without a mic because it's being live streamed. Can you hang tight for just a moment and let Salim go ahead and go back? And I'll come back up to you, Chip.
The response so far, unfortunately, about the reason for hostility has been so general that I could not understand at all as to what is the reason for the hostility. Specifically, we understand through the grapevine that members on the board have been very disrespectful to the senior minister. There have been occasions where they have even shoved him and said, I feel like pushing you down the stairs. So obviously there are emotions which are involved, which are very human and individual, but we need to know them so we can consider corrective actions. Thank you.
That was the next question. I will go on to the next question.
Tell me, we were Robin in response to the earlier questions. So,
Okay.
Yeah, which question are you addressing, Robin? This one. So I record the board meetings, and this last meeting, they were working very well together. I was very impressed with them. There was a few little things that were, she has one opinion, she has another, and so forth. But I was very impressed how the whole board worked this last meeting. And again, I sit there and I listen to it, and I've done depositions and different things. So even though I'm not looking at you guys, I'm hearing it and seeing you guys actually worked very well together. I was so impressed I didn't go home upset or anything, which most of the time is like, damn. So, I just want to give the board how well they were working together. So I've been recording all of them, sweetheart. They will be. I had a few jobs this is an unpaid job, and so yes.
Excuse me? We're not going to have crosstalk in the room because whoever is speaking needs to have a microphone in their hand for the benefit of the live stream. So if you have questions, please hold them.
Okay.
Thank
yes,
you.
they are able. We can get you links so that you can hear the board meetings. But again, I just want to say I was very impressed. It was, there was small little things, but they worked as a team together. So thank you, board.
Thank you.
Chris was next.
I'm going to try to keep this brief because we don't have a lot of time. But I wanted to, yes. Okay. Okay.
Would you please answer that question, Janet?
Which question? Okay. The second question. I was on the search team that brought Reverend Tim here. I was very much in favor of hiring him because I felt that his skills and experience were exactly what we needed. And if anyone could help this church as senior minister, that he could do it. My understanding is that within the first week that he was here, there was an incident in which his background of abuse and another person's background of abuse came together in a disastrous way. And it's not clear that we ever really recovered from that. It was not an isolated incident. I have not been present for any abusive remarks. But I have heard about them from people who were present. Memory is not as reliable as we would like to think. We remember what we understood. We remember the meaning that we made of a person's words or a situation. There are a variety of reasons why one might even not remember something that one said or did, or what was said to one or done in one's presence. I mean, think about it. How often are you relating something to somebody and you'd say, well, he said something like, because we don't record the actual words. We record something like what people say. I work with people who have rages. And not always, but at times, they do not remember what happens when they're in a rage. Our brains, when we're in that kind of state, are not doing normal thinking, rational thinking, and are not recording necessarily in the usual way. There are other things that can make us forget something that we, at one point, were aware of. Rage is one, grief, trauma, dissociation. When a person places little value on something that's said or doesn't see it as particularly important, then they can forget it. And sometimes when you are unable to tolerate yourself for what you have said, you might forget it. So, as I said, I did not witness abuse, but I have spoken to people who did. It seems likely that it occurred. The person who is said to have done it does not remember it. That person clearly has work to do. I have witnessed disrespect, mostly in the form of discounting, counter-attacking, not necessarily an attack, but rather than responding to something that someone says, saying something that implies that the person who presented that information has some sort of problem, rather than there being a problem with the information, with them hearing the information, whatever else it might be. People have sidestepped, have changed subjects, which I find to be disrespectful. And I have to apologize for the fact that during the first few months I was on the board, I was quite uncertain as to what I could or should do when those things occurred. It also took me a while to understand that those things were occurring because they didn't necessarily sound hostile. They didn't necessarily sound conflictual. But there was enough not listening to feel very disrespectful in hindsight. So those of us who witness these things need to learn to say something. I believe that I'm doing better about that now. We need to intervene and not allow such behavior to go unchallenged. I guess that's it.
Are your questions related to this topic? Because the next board question moves into another arena. Yes, Chris, please.
I just feel disturbed by what I'm hearing here, the way that this is being explained to the congregation. To me, it feels disingenuous when we talk about that this is a systemic problem. There is truth in that there is a systemic problem. But I do not understand why it is not okay for people to take personal responsibility for their own actions, and why it is not okay for us to have consequences. I don't understand that. That's normal in society. And to hear this, when you're talking about people going into rages, I mean, I hate to say it's like a rage apologist. It's like you still have to acknowledge that, address it, and do something about it, especially if it's impacting the business of this church. The board is here to do the business of the church. If they cannot do that business, it just blows my mind that that is not considered. My question is, why can we not do that? Like, why are we not allowed to say, this person has done these things that are not acceptable, and there should be consequences for that?
Okay. I cannot take responsibility for somebody else. If any of the people who have done these things would like to take responsibility, I'd be all in favor of it, believe me. But like I said, there are, different reports about what happened. And so it's a little hard to get someone to take responsibility when they don't believe they've done anything wrong. That is the problem.
Ricky was the first hand I saw at the previous break. So.
It takes a lot of courage for me to get up as a board member. My name is Ricky, and I'm going to be very, very cautious and mindful about what I say, because I think this subject is a quagmire. So I'm just going to say a few things and turn it into a question. First question I want to sort of present to everyone is, just because someone says something doesn't make it true. This incident...
Ricky, excuse me?
Yes.
If you weren't part of the incident, I believe you don't have the appropriate... you can't stand in validity and speak to it if you weren't part of it. So I'm going to try and minimize editorializing here. And if you have a direct question for Jan relative to this circumstance, I would happily receive that for the congregation.
Okay.
If you have a personal response as a board member without editorializing.
I'm not sure what you mean by editorializing, but...
You're describing others' feelings and other circumstances that you weren't present for. I invite you to speak to your own feelings in response.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm just saying there were no witnesses to the alleged incident, and I'm going to call it an alleged incident. One thing I do know is true is that the person that was accused has no history of violence, has no history of
Again, you're speaking for someone else. I invite you to
You don't
speak
want me
for
to do that?
yourself.
All right, I'll just say I then. Okay. I am concerned. Let me just think for 2 seconds, Margie, so I can formulate my thoughts. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your facilitation, by the way.
Breathe
both of
into
you.
this space so
Yeah,
that you
I'm
do.
breathing into my heart. I want our highest, best here at Unity Church of Hawaii. And like you said, I think we all do here. That's why we're all here today. So I guess my question is to all of us and to you too. What can we do to move beyond this and heal our systemic issues? Because I'm on the board. The last few board meetings have rocked. We have really gotten along well. We've had a flow. There were no fights. I thought they went great. So, I mean, they weren't perfect. We're not perfect people. But what can we do? So my question is, what can we do to move beyond these, move beyond the quicksand, move beyond the quagmire, move beyond the finger pointing, move beyond all of this? What can we do to elevate ourselves to get closer to unity principles? So that's my question. Is that okay, Margie?
Thank you, Ricky. Perfect.
Thank you very much. And who wants the microphone? Thank you.
As I said before, systemic change requires, and solving a problem, requires viewing the problem from a different level of consciousness, from a different level of thinking. If you want to change members of the board, go ahead. I kind of think it would be a mistake at this point since we're finally kind of working together. But, you know, that's the congregation's right. The congregation has the right to recall a board member if they think it's a good idea. There's going to be an annual meeting. People will be voting for, we'll be voting for 3 members of the board, and I don't know if there's 2 or 3 that'll be running for re-election, but whatever. Make sure there are plenty of candidates that you think will do a good job, please.
In the middle, Cindy, same row where you are. I'm sorry, I can't see the face of who it is. It looks like a blue-green top. Long hair. She's turning around, looking to the back. Yes.
Oh, that's Robin again.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Brief, Robin, you've already had a chance.
No worries. Thank you. So my question to you, Jan, is I don't know exactly how long ago this happened, but it was quite a while ago. Why didn't actions be taken at that point instead of why are we bringing it up now, is my point.
I was not on the board at the time. I only found out about this a few months ago. We're not talking about one incident. There's one statement that people are passing around. But, you know, there was more. The problem, I believe, was that, as I said, I don't think that the board was necessarily a safe place for the minister. And I certainly could see thinking that bringing the matter to the board would make things worse. You may.
Since it involves me, and I've asked myself that question as well, and it's a good question, Robin. And having worked with a lot of people who've been abused, one of the things that's hardest for them is when they're asked in a court of law, why did it take you so long to come forward? Were there any witnesses? That's what the whole Me Too movement is about. And so I think it's a good question to ask. I appreciate Jan's approach and saying that it didn't feel completely safe at the time. And also, I was in a state of shock. I know that may not make sense, but I was in a state of shock. I had just moved here and sold or given away 3/4 of our stuff. And I didn't realize, where have I come? What is happening? So anyway, that's my response. Thank you.
I have a spiritual response to this issue. What can we do is own our part. What can we do is not be afraid to walk into the truth of this circumstance. That means hearing all sides, all input. Closing down the conversation is not useful. Neither is running it over and over and over. Have you had sufficient input on these first two questions? All right. Chip, you've already asked. Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Catania. I'm the secretary of the board. And I'm here to say that I was a witness. I witnessed directly disrespect. It was disrespect so appalling to me that I was stunned with disbelief. And I'm speaking because I don't want to minimize the situation. I don't think that we can brush it under the rug anymore. I apologize for waiting so long to speak up. But I have stood here and watched my church, the community that I love, get torn apart from he said, she said situations, and people accusing others. I witnessed a situation. I was present. And this did happen.
Where's my microphone runner? Cindy, the woman seated, pardon me, the person seated with her hand in the air.
Bev.
Thank you, Bev.
Here, Bev.
Forgive me, even with my glasses, I can't always resolve
Excuse me,
faces.
my friends.
I'm Bev Tim. I relate to what Debbie said because this is my church. And I haven't wanted to be around because of all the conflict, not just the board. There's so much conflict here, what Debbie said. People blaming each other. We blame so much. We need to look at our own responsibility in the matter. My heart is just broken. I found so much love in this church when I came in 2010. And my heart is broken. I'm sorry. I had to say that. My question to Jan is, if you could please offer some clarification when you talk about the disrespect at the board meetings and sidestepping. My question is, are you talking about the entire board, which includes the minister? Are you saying that, I'm just going to say it, is Tim maybe disrespectful sometimes? I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask. Is it the whole board? Because we all need to take responsibility, I think. I just want that clarification. Thank you.
I have not felt that Reverend Tim was being disrespectful. Although I do remember one occasion when he responded sharply to someone, and I was puzzled because the situation didn't seem on the face of it, to be that intense. The other person also responded sharply. Another person jumped in and, sharply. And so this was one of the things where I knew there must be something, but I didn't know what it was. I also want to say that I do really believe in divine order. Things happen the way they happen for reasons. Now, when I began to realize that something was terribly wrong, I tried to make an appointment to meet with Reverend Tim. You'd think that would be simple, right? So I sent an email, and nothing happened. I was like, oh, that's odd. Well, so I sent a text, and nothing happened. And I was like, oh, that's odd. I called the church office. Did you know that, well, I don't know if it's still the case, but at that time, the outgoing message did not give any instruction how to make an appointment with the senior minister. I could leave a message for Lisa or for Kathy, or there was, a third option to just leave a message. And I was like, dang, I don't feel like that's going to work. So I feel like something was going on there. I admit I am lousy at knowing how to do stuff. And so I probably waited too long for a response. I may have chosen the wrong avenue in the first place. I don't know. I'm not good with social stuff. But one way or another, oh yeah, and then I did make an appointment, and it was put on Reverend Tim's calendar on the week they said he could not meet with me. And so I was scheduled for the following week. And then Joanne called and asked me if I could come and be an observer at a meeting at 3:00 this afternoon. And I was like, well, luckily I was planning on being there because I thought I had an appointment with Reverend Tim. So sorry, I digress. Yes, I have observed Reverend Tim be sharp with someone, but in general, more people are sharp with him than the other way around, I would say. But I think more to the point, there was one occasion when Reverend came back from a trip and expressed to the board that he was in a process of discernment, which, he then proceeded to explain what that meant. And the first response from a board member was that they did not think this was it was proper for him to raise these issues in open meeting. To me, that seems like it would hurt. You start, opening up and sharing with people how things are for you, and they say, you shouldn't have done that. That's, to me, disrespectful. But that's the kind of my point about it not being obvious, right? That it was not not direct attacks, not calling people names, generally not even speaking over each other. although that does happen from time to time when people get excited. But yeah, it's been much more subtle, and sometimes I think without the background you wouldn't know that it was disrespectful. This is my view, and again, I've only been on the board for the last 10 months, 9 months, whatever, and I don't know about before that.
It's green, thank you. I'm going to recognize Marcia, and then from that moment forward, we're going to use the mic stands on the front of the room, and I ask you to come be in line for your question, keeping it, and I'm going to be asking if it's in accord with the subject on the floor at the moment. So if you have a question after Marcia, please come to either of these microphone stands, and we will put a mic there for the next questions.
Aloha. As all of you know, I'm Marcia Fithian, and I want to talk about the luau and the gala. Okay?
Marcia, we're on a different topic.
We are on a different topic, but I want to talk about the board, okay? This is important about the board, okay? Respect.
Can I ask you, please, to hold your question? We're moving through a specific set of questions that were brought by a group of congregants to the board.
Exactly.
We'll address those first,
Okay.
and then we will entertain other topics.
But
okay?
it's not anything to do. This is in response of why the board should be known, okay, for its great things that they've done.
Thank you. We'll take statements of appreciation at the end.
Thank you.
If you have a question about the topic that's on the floor, I invite you to come to the microphone and address the board and Jan with that inquiry. Yes? Juliet, is that right? Please, the mic is yours.
Okay, come on up, and then I don't know how these micro stand, but you can just pass it on.
Just hold it, because it needs to be at your chin.
My name is Juliet, and I'm going to ask a difficult question regarding what we've been talking about. Thank you, Debbie, for getting up and speaking your truth. Thank you. And Jan, you mentioned that you had been a witness to some of the abuse, or you had been a witness to disrespect. I think a lot of people here would like to, well, you talk about making sure that we have at the annual meeting, we vote for the people that we know and understand and stuff. I think it's important to put a name from whoever was on the board who either Debbie or Jan witnessed, so that we know when we go to vote. It's a difficult question.
It is a difficult question, and I posit that it is not either Jan or Debbie's responsibility or others who witnessed circumstances to report a name. We were talking generally about personal responsibility.
So how do we know when we go to vote?
I understand. It's a frustrating situation. I invite people who are responsible to out themselves, own the behavior, and also they get to own what's been reported here, because I was present at the last board meeting. It may have been the first meeting I was present for that they functioned in a healthy way. So I indeed give them praise for whatever caught their attention and got the movement going in the right direction, because it's good to see. Out of chaos, the spirit of creativity and the Holy Spirit within each of us can guide this community forward. The chaos is messy, but it's the place of creativity and healing. Do you subscribe to that principle? Are you willing to engage the work in this community, beginning with self? Because I hope when UWM is here to consult and our board continues to move forward in a positive direction, and we bless Tim for his presence here, and with sadness send him on to his next great adventure at Unity of Marin, we can stand in courageous action in this community. So, Juliet, I don't have a simple answer for you because I don't believe it's up to any of us, even those of us who have witnessed it, to be the reporter of that detail, difficult as it is. So somebody gets to own their behavior, or not, or to stay in the shadow.
I love that. There's just so much gossip going around. He said, she said thing, and to try and nip that in the bud is...
Do you remember something Sky said? I will remind you of a wisdom that Sky spoke to us. It's human to make up a story when you hear a kernel. Are you storytellers? I raise my hand to that. It's human to, in your mind, make up what you think that kernel means. The spiritual wisdom and the not giving the shadow control is to say, that's my story about that situation. I can't make up a story for somebody else and trust that it's factual. So Sky said, if you got to make up the story, just don't tell it to anybody. Because triangulation is what will kill an organization. Meaning, I have a problem with Tim, but I'm over here talking to Bonita about it every day, just complaining and carrying on. Rather than going to Tim and saying, I feel this way about a situation, a circumstance, an interaction. And I'd like to clean that up between us. And I'd like to understand what took place from your perspective, so I'm not telling myself a story that's not true, which is what we do. So we get to be invited into lots of opportunity for spiritual growth. Do you remember a talk Sky and I gave years ago that was titled, Another Opportunity for Spiritual Growth? We're standing in a big one. And if you are in this room, whether you are conscious of it or not, you called yourself to the growth that Tim talked about this morning in the message. We are here because we care about this community, and we are here because we want to understand how to heal. And the healing begins with self. And I will step down off the soapbox with my apologies, Madam President.
I would like to actually answer Juliet's question in another way, which is, well, similar way. That question that Reverend Tim said he was asked by the Marin Board about, what's your shadow and what do you do about it? That's a great question to ask.
Okay. I'm concerned here that I'm familiar with the Me Too movement, but not specifically. I'm concerned here that we're not acknowledging this situation. We're not talking honestly. We have some psychology words, but where is our heart here? And what if this happens again? This is the second minister, possibly the third, And some of this behavior we've witnessed before in other situations. So what are we going to do? How are we going to change our behavior? And I, for one, am kind of shy about confronting awkward situations. Perhaps that's my shadow side, but I'm going to stand up now and I'm going to talk to the person who in the rumor mill might or might not be the one that started the upset, but I'm going to take that responsibility. And I invite us to do that, to be honest from the heart and just stand for the truth in love and light.
Joanne.
To me, what's important right now is to realize that the healing is systemic. as Jan indicated. We are in the process of inviting UWM in. So far, the indication is that they will be here for months, not days, not 3 weeks like last time. They will be here for months. Rather than trying to think that we, by ourselves, can solve it in this meeting, I would invite us to have patience and wait for the professionals to come and guide us through the process. It's very clear that they have a process. They've begun to reveal a little bit of it to us. And I know it's hard to wait, but apparently it has to start with elements of trust. And if there's one thing I know about this church in my recent interactions, is the level of trust is exceedingly low. So let's wait for them to come. They're professionals. They're trained to do it. And go under that guidance rather than today trying to solve it by insisting on names and putting people in the stockards. Or is that the right word? The stocks, in the stocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I believe that's a spiritually wise course. The reason Unity Worldwide Ministries espouses specific procedures when one minister leaves and a congregation prepares itself fully, completely, to call its next minister is what they've seen in history. Frequently, a church wants the Band-Aid fixed. Bolt this new thing onto the system now, and let's charge forward. Never mind that grieving work. Never mind that shadow stuff. No, let's just charge forward, i.e., by hiring our next minister. And the experience you often get is an unintended rebound minister. What happens when you divorce and you don't do your own personal work? Oh, golly, that person shows up again in a different package. So please, thank you, Joanne, and thank you, board, for the wisdom to take that step, the willingness yourself to be patient, to go for the long process, hopefully conclusionary answer.
I was a member when David McClure was here years and years ago. That's when I became a member. And I've been in California part of the time and come back to Hawaii. And my challenges of trying to look at this prayerfully and allowing Spirit to come through with me with the truth as I perceive it, is that when Jack was here, I was quite disturbed how at a meeting he was just sort of bulldozed in conversation, and that made me feel so uncomfortable. And then when I've observed what's going on here, I know some of it's gossip. I know some of it, there's a reason for everything. I know everybody has a point of view. And so this morning, I sat and listened to both of his sermons. The second one was exquisite, and so was the first one. We had in this community a wonderful minister.
Excuse me.
Please say thank you.
Dial down the emotion and speak from your heart.
I'm speaking from my heart.
And
I am speaking from my heart. Please don't tell me I'm not speaking from my heart. I am speaking from my heart.
Breathe into that space. I just invite you to take a breath. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, he talked about the, maybe that's what it is, my shadow. Maybe it's when I was told, don't say it that way, Emily. Well, I am saying it this way today. And I will continue to say my truth.
Please, I invite that.
Okay. And my knees are shaking, believe it or not.
Good
thing I have something.
No,
wait a minute.
Joanne.
Joanne.
Emily going to find the space to speak.
I think I am allowed to say something. I'm not saying anything against you right now.
Emily.
I observed you, however, at a meeting. This is the truth. Screaming at Jack. Yes. Maybe Tim, Jack. I'm talking about when Jack was here a while ago, and when there was one of these meetings.
Okay.
I heard it.
Do you have a question?
My question is this.
Thank you.
I apologize if I said something some people consider rude. I didn't mean to be rude. It's my perception as I see it. So my question is this. Tim has so many talents. Were his talents addressed appropriately? I noticed this morning, I looked at board meeting records, I think it was September, it was about a retreat center. Now, what has been addressed, before he leaves, he has many ideas. I think it would be appropriate, Margie, from my point of view, do you think it would be appropriate for him to share what he was trying to share with the community of what he wanted to do to help this community and use his talents? It'd be good to have that addressed. Do you agree?
I agree that having the benefit of Tim's expertise and gifts and talents would be a blessing in our community. Whether or not we have a venue for that today, probably not. But perhaps the board has heard your request. Perhaps they can find a venue and utilize that.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific question?
My
about
specific
the
question
topic on the
was
floor?
this: will there be available? Will he have the opportunity? And I realize this will take time on his part, but he spent a lot of time here understanding also what's going on. Will he have the opportunity? Will the board or the congregation or whatever allow him, or the worldwide ministries? And I'm sure that they have their side also, like his sermon was talking about this morning. Everybody does. So my question, I'll finish my question. Yeah. My question is this: will Reverend Tim be allowed to express himself of what did not happen, that what he wanted to happen in this congregation? Was he curtailed from doing this by inappropriate attitudes? Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Without blaming anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question for a member of the board to answer. Linda, one moment, please.
Hi.
Linda, excuse me. I'm asking a member of the board to address the question that was just asked.
I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Sims because she's the one who's been working with Tim.
So there was a question about what's happening with the retreat ministry. There is some bright news on the horizon. Yes, with Reverend Tim and the board, we have created a retreat ministry. Our first minister who will be coming out is James Buchanan. As you recall him as Chip, he worked with Reverend Sky during Reverend Sky's last months here at Unity. And he'll be bringing his group from Dallas. He's now the head minister, lead minister of the Unity Church in Dallas. And that will be happening in May. They'll be coming out to participate in the Memorial Day lantern floating ceremony. They'll be here with us at the church. They'll be sponsoring our breakfast. We'll be teaching LUT classes with them. It's a wonderful ministry that, yes, Reverend Tim initiated, and it is underway. So there's some bright news on the horizon.
Thank you, Suzanne. So there's a remainder of the question as to how the board may benefit from Tim's presence, and we may all benefit from that presence up until the time he leaves. So I entrust that question to the board for another time. Linda,
Okay.
you have a
Thank
question.
you. Yes, it's all right. I'll adjust. I'll get with where we are now. It's fine. It's fine, Margie. It's a fine. There's no problem. I just think that that we should wait until the team gets here, the professionals, because we're going through something as the church as a whole, and that we're having all this, as the list said, it's hearsay, and if there's something that harm that has been done, that somebody should step up and say, so-and-so, push me down the stairs or whatever, and we'll, get at it. My things of disrespect might not be the same as someone else's, or my, what I perceive, or my thing, disrespect or abuse or whatever, and somebody should just come out and say what it is instead of trying to smoke somebody out at a meeting. It feels like a little bit like a witch hunt. So if we could do this when some of the emotions have gone out, and we could do it in a loving manner, I think that would be a lot better, and the church as a whole would be a lot more loving, and we wouldn't have all this discord. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Salim, I'm going to invite you to the microphone. Do you have a question? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jan, you mentioned that on the board, some people realize that they cannot hold back their anger, that they've expressed things that they are sort of regretful about. That's what I understand. My question is, should people who cannot control their emotions serve on the board? So this is a question now for those people who have really abused physically, verbally, Tim, to resign from the board before a vote of censure is put to you. Thank you very much.
Salim, thank you. Sally.
My name is Sally Hartman. I've got so much I'd like to say, but I do want to respond to you, Margie, and saying that you don't think it's helpful to go over and over things. You know, a lot of us are just really finding out what's going on because Reverend Tim is leaving. We are not going over and over
Trying
things.
to find a balance between what's helpful and what's not.
We are learning things so that we can try to figure out what we do as a community to respond to the problems. There are obvious problems. We have lost 3 dedicated long-term staff members, Lisa, Judy, and Alethea, in the last year, mostly because of problems they had with the church and the board, and now Reverend Tim. So the idea that there was an incident a year ago and that's reverberated and now we need to just not talk openly about what's happened and address things, I think is completely wrong. I completely agree that Unity Worldwide Ministries should come in and we should all participate in that. But Debbie stood up here and made a statement that she witnessed that. She's not making up a story.
It is not hearsay, as was.
That's right. She is not making up a story. It is not hearsay. So to paint all this stuff and just say, well, you're making up stories and we don't know really what's true, we have some facts. And I would like to know what facts are, because I don't think that the board has responded. It is the responsibility of the organization to respond to problems and situations and abuse if it leads to resignations or problems. And they have not done that. And so, as Reverend Tim said, the organization starts up here with us. So since the board hasn't done it, and I understand it's hard to feel intimidated or whatever, we have to be able to do it. And in order to do that, we have to have facts. And I don't think it's okay to just be vague generalizations about, well, you know, we're all working and we're working together and we're going to have somebody come in. I mean, that's fine, and maybe we can go through the process. But to try to tamp down feelings that are really vibrant about our community and the lack of knowledge among the members about what has really gone on and is just wrong. We are entitled to that. We have a right to know when we vote for people what happened and who said things and who did things, because if we don't know, we'll just make the same decisions, because you can't tell from a little thing on a piece of paper when you're voting what personality dynamics are. I think maybe the vetting committee should have to, they ask the board applicants to take that DISC test and then report that before we all vote, so that we know whether we're voting for people who are all dominant people that's going to create problems. And we can ask the vetting committee to ask about shadow work. I mean, we need to really get down to brass tacks and not just it's very difficult, and especially in a spiritual community, because you don't want to badmouth anybody. You know, it's very hard to name names, and it's very tricky and delicate to walk around. But I don't think we can ignore it. I don't think we can paper it over it. I think we have to be really honest so that we all can figure out what we are going to do.
You're right. So I invite the board to take note throughout this afternoon of the questions and comments that have received applause, because those are the votes registered of your congregation, to whom you are responsible. I'm going to recognize Diana, because others of you have already had the mic at least once. Diana, take the microphone.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions.
Ask
Thank you
one
for
at a
letting
time.
this go beyond 1:59, because we had a lot more questions, so thank you for not shutting it down. The other is, I wrote a question to the board regarding community talks, and I didn't get an answer. But I do feel strongly that this community talks that arose out of Hopcoff, which is the work that the congregation went through with Reverend Albert Wingate after Sky passed, or
After
made his
Jack's
transition.
departure.
After Jack's?
After
Okay.
Jack's departure.
Okay, so that's one of the tools that was given to the congregation, and it was voted down by the board. It was discontinued, and I don't feel that that should have been even voted on, because it was the congregants' tool. So I am asking, however the board needs to reinstate it. And I realize that you all don't have a lot of time. Thank you for everything that you're doing. You've fleshed out the bylaws, and you're taking time to improve our church. But I do believe that, especially now, we're not going to get to everybody's questions in this forum. And we do need a place where we can go to one place, ask one question once, and everybody can get the same answer without the grapevine making up its own stories, okay? So can I ask the congregants if they're all in favor of reinstating? Do they want this community talks again? Can you raise your hand? Show the board what your opinion is. And I ask the board to take note and take steps to correct this. And again, I offer my time to get questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
For the record on community talks, there were no more questions coming to the forum, and that was why it was discontinued. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be started up again. We just need to find a volunteer.
Thank you, Jan. Maureen?
Okay, maybe some of this is going to be repetitive, but I think it's important to bring up. As a member of the congregation, after Sky left, then it was Jack, and all of a sudden he was gone. And now we're having the same thing with Tim, and Tim, I wish you could have stayed. I really do. And it's the thing of, we don't know. All of a sudden, it's like we're blindsided, and we have no idea what's happening, why it's happening. And a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, I sort of felt like there's this icy pond, and we're all standing around the edges of it, and nobody wants to go out in the middle and, confront stuff so that in such a way that the rest of us are going to understand about, without getting anybody's dirty laundry involved or anything, specific like that, but in such a way that we can understand as a group of people who are part of this church and, want to be part of it and want to know what's happening and be part of the healing of it. We can't do that if we don't know. And case in point, you guys had a meeting, and Tim apparently shared a lot of things. And guess what? I never found out about it except from the email hours after it was over. And I sort of felt disrespected as as a member of this church because of that. And I know it probably wasn't anybody's intention to do that, but that's the kind of thing that needs to happen. And that's why the gossip mill gets started, because whatever it is, right? Because people don't understand. And all we hear is, oh, there was abuse, there was this, there was that. But there's nothing we as members of the congregation can do to do anything about it. And you find out after the fact, and then you find, and then Tim is leaving too.
Do you have a question?
So, I guess my question is, what can we do to make sure that that doesn't keep happening? Because it's a pattern that apparently is happening again.
Thank you. We've had a fair amount of input on steps to take forward. Does the board wish to offer anything additional? Thank you, Joanne.
Oh, you're done. You want to retreat? Okay. The reason, I don't know, I was not on the board when Jack was here, so I don't know what went on with the board. The reason that you were taken by surprise with Tim's resignation is that we were taken by surprise by Tim's resignation. He had spoken in June or July indicating that he was unhappy and he was going through a process of discernment. I don't think anyone at that time thought that discernment meant I'm going to be actively looking for another job. I didn't think that's what it meant. Now, what happened without anyone knowing is that in order for Tim to be released from his 3-year contract, he had to go to UWM and apply to be released from his contract. It is recommended procedure in that to tell the board president, I was not informed. He applied at Marin. It is recommended procedure to tell the board president, I was not informed. What we were informed was rather suddenly that he had a personal meeting, that's it. I assumed that since it was so sudden, that it was probably to Wichita for his family, because in the meantime, his brother had had a stroke, and his mother was, his 90-something year mother was taking care of his brother. We found out after the meeting when someone said, oh, where are you going for the personal meeting? He said, I'm going to the West Coast. And at that point, some of the more inquisitive members of the board, and it was not me, got on the internet. The first thing, at least one of them reported, is they went straight to the job site for Unity to see what openings there were on the West Coast, discovered that there was an opening at Unity of Marin, went to the Unity of Marin website and found out that he was a candidate speaking that Sunday. So that's one reason we didn't keep you more informed. Now, he said, and it is true, that after he talked in open session, I was meeting with him regularly on Wednesday mornings, and I was quite adamant, and I still feel adamant, that an open session is not where personnel issues are discussed. Personnel and legal issues are discussed in executive session. I asked him if he wanted an executive session. He did not at that time indicate that he wanted an executive session, nor did he ever since then ask for an executive session. Now, what I'm hearing, which I think would be very wise, is now that we know that we have this pattern, it may be appropriate for the board to set up a regular executive session when we get the next senior minister, just to keep our finger on the pulse. Maybe that would be a very proactive thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Chris?
I'm having a very hard time knowing where to start and focus here, because there's so many things that have been addressed. And I have questions, for sure. But I say, I am a survivor of extreme physical, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. And to hear people sitting here and discounting this when there is a witness, I find appalling. Part of the reason that I have backed off of this community is because of these sorts of attitudes. And I have spoken about this before, this using the unity principles almost as a weapon of silence to not allow us to speak our truths or to address problems in this community. And that is not what should be done. Give me just a second to breathe here.
Chris, may I just interject a comment?
Yes.
This is what it looks like when the shadow is not in the driver's seat. He's owned his shadow, and yet here he stands, speaking calmly and working to remain in that state of calmness. Some love for our brother Chris as his example today.
Thank you. Thank you, Margie. I do try, when I ask questions and speak, to think about things before I ask them. I try not to say things out of anger. There is a lot of emotion for me. The other thing that I think really upsets me is when we say, or when board members have said, well, we need to wait for unity to come and do this thing. Of course, we all want that. The whole congregation has been in support of that, but this is a spiritual community. Are you telling me that we do not understand the difference between right and wrong? As a community, we can't discern what action should be taken? That I do not understand. I really don't. I really don't. And that disturbs me. Why would I want to be a part of a community that cannot even tell the difference between something that is okay and something that is not okay, and take the actions to correct it? That's my point of view on that. And to address what Joanne said, Reverend Tim cried during a board meeting saying how unhappy he was, how unhappy his wife was. How could you possibly say that you did not know that he was not happy or that he was thinking about other things? That is obvious. He has said it on multiple occasions. You could have just asked him. I have asked, and I have encouraged the congregation, ask the staff how they're doing. Ask Tim how he's doing. Ask the school how they're doing. I have done that. And from every single one of those, the same answer has come up. I am so unhappy with something that's going on in the board. And we've had resignation after resignation. You said there's been no board resignations. We've had 4 staff resignations, including long-term resignations, like long-term staff, people that have devoted their lives to this community. You know, and our relationship with the school, it may have improved, but has been at such a bad point they didn't even attend the staff Christmas party, which had never happened before. That's how bad it is. And I guess it's complex. I understand that. But even at those meetings, it was the same thing. It was like no one was hearing what was said, and a staff member was being berated. No one has stood up for the staff or the minister. So I don't know. It just disappoints me. It hurts me. And when someone over here said that it had broken their heart, you think it didn't break my heart when I devoted my life to this community? I mean, we were working double hours pretty regularly without pay because we love this community, coming in at the drop of a hat, any moment's notice, doing everything that we could for this community. And to lose that, this was my spiritual home, the place that helped me transform my life, and I saw it in person after person, and it has been torn apart by powerful personalities and lack of integrity and this inability to hold accountability. It is okay. We can still forgive people. We can still love people. But We have to hold people accountable, and we, especially in leadership. You know, I'm a licensed unity teacher candidate. We are supposed to be spiritual leaders. The board are leaders of the community. They have to be, without question, highly ethical. So I'll just leave it at that, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Linda? Well, I have a few comments piggybacking on Sally and Chris. And my concern is that when Reverend Tim does leave, with knowing that we've seen Judy, Lisa, Alethea, and Reverend Tim, employees of 4, 11, 26, and 2 years employment, resign under the tenure of this Board of Trustees. So my concern is going forward when Reverend Tim leaves, I am requesting, and probably some of you are requesting, that no one be fired, verbally harassed about their work, or given too much work for one employee, and this is for all the existing employees, for Kathy, Reverend Johanna, John, the music director, etc. We need, for the business of the church, we need this core staff to pay the bills, to open the door, to answer requests, to do the business of the church. So I'm requesting, and probably by your applause, that would signal that we believe that to be true. Thank you. If you wish to, please.
To date, no one on the board has discussed terminating anybody.
Suzanne. I don't know if I have a question, but I hope you will let me say something. This last week, I received a phone call from someone here in the congregation, and it was about an hour and a half long, and it was a complete download of gossip. And I felt nauseous after the conversation. I really felt like I was sick to my stomach. I bumped into some folks at Whole Foods a few days later, and they're people who used to go to the church here. And I chatted with them, and I said, well, why don't you come here anymore? And they said, we can't stand all the gossip and all the bad-mouthing that's going on. And by the way, did you know, and they gave me another gossip I hadn't heard, you know, that we're in trouble with the Attorney General because Twice Blessed didn't pay the GET tax that was due, okay? So another one. I probably had a list of 100 things. I didn't want to fill in the blanks, and yet your mind says, I need answers. You know, as Reverend Sky was saying, okay, make up your own story, but don't spread it. That's one thing, but not having the answers is leading to a tremendous amount of attrition, tremendous amount of confusion. And so the other thing I wanted to say is, I also don't want to accuse someone of being guilty until I've heard from that person. I wouldn't want to be in that person's shoes myself. So we've heard the accusations, but we haven't actually heard from the person that has been accused. And what I'm trying to figure out is how do we create a safe environment for not only the people that say they've witnessed something, but also for the person who is accused. And I just don't, I wouldn't want to be in that position myself. So I had to look at my own shadow and say, I'm judging somebody before I've ever heard their side of the story, okay? I need to hear that before I can even understand the full scope of the picture. I need perspective. And Reverend Tim, you said something when you spoke on that Tuesday evening. You said you had a chaplain that you didn't get along with and you were always at odds with, and you finally said, I need to call that person and find out, you know, how can we have a conversation? And you kind of opened the door for me. And so this week I called that person and I said, can I please speak with you, because I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand being left out in the dark and waiting for Unity Worldwide Ministries. Now, I'm not saying that's the solution for all of us to do,
But we have to look at our own hearts and say, okay, we need both sides of the story here. And we need a safe place for the people who have witnessed something to come out, and we need a safe place for the people who are accused.
Absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne. Robin.
So this question is actually for the congregation. So I think all of us have been abused. I've been raped 6 different times, starting at the age of 3 and 7 and so forth. And so what I've been seeing in the past couple years, including with Jack, is people are asking questions and they were not getting answers. I'm going to say a name only because that's where it kind of really started, was we've not had any information about the balance with the church and with the school with Jack. It was when Sky was here, we had, and we were paying bills and so forth. So I don't think that we have really healed from Sky, and I don't think people can believe that he took his own life. Yes, we're saying that we've healed, but my question is if people are asking about finances to keep this church alive and to know the truth about it, these board members are trying to get to the bottom of them. Kathy Whitmire is the first one that we've actually had a balance sheet since before Jack. I think it was Sky when we had it. So, she's really doing a great job, and the board is asking questions. And when we had the witch hunt with Jack here and the 3 members, they were asking questions about where's the money. And I saw on the sheets that Kathy passes out, when Jack was here, there was something there 1 month, and then the next month, and there was money in there, and then the next month it was completely off the list. So, you guys, people that are asking questions are not always wrong. We are asking because we're trying to get the church back where it was, at least where Sky was, and better. Okay, so please think about that when you've got these people on the board that are asking questions, because they're not all just trying to make war. We're really just trying. I would love it to get back to where it was Sky or better. Okay, because I know it wasn't perfect.
Do you have a specific question, Robin?
I
appreciate your comment.
Yeah, thank you. So the question to you guys is, when people are asking questions about money, okay, that are on the board right now, and also the 3 that were before, could you think about that? We're trying to thrive and not just survive. So thank you.
Thank you. Joanne?
There's a lot of emotion for me too, and I'm not sure where it's all coming from. My question is this: as members of a church, would we all be willing to learn how to speak to people who we feel are overwhelming us? Can we be strong enough to say, excuse me, could you stop just a minute and breathe? Can we hold hands? I would like to hear what you have to say, but I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I'm feeling badgered, whatever the word is. Because we need to learn how to be strong enough to say, excuse me, I want to talk with you, and I will talk with you when you talk with me as a human person, as a being with a heart. And I think we need to learn how to do that instead of being afraid that we can help each other. Learn to listen to each other by saying that's the way we want to hear from that person, and that's the way we want to work with them. instead of being in effect by running away or being horrified, which I can understand when somebody comes at you 25 miles an hour and you're just standing there. I know it can feel like a bulldozer. But we have to learn how to say, please stop. Can we talk about this in a more calm manner? Something like that.
Thank you, Joanne. Jim?
I would just like to offer a perspective on this afternoon. Maureen and I have been coming here every Sunday since about 2010 or 2011, when the Religious Science Church of Honolulu disbanded, and we had been members of that for 25 years. There are three kinds of people: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and then the rest of us who sit around going, what just happened? You know, and the thing of it is, that's where the rumors come from. And Maureen and I are not that important in the congregation to where we don't even have people call us up and say, oh, did you hear the latest? We get it third and fourth and fifth hand, you know, over, and we're tired of that. And that's why we're at this meeting, because we want this to stop. Thank you.
You can always count on Jim for succinct spiritual lessons. Marcia, did you have a question on this topic, or were you wanting to offer your opinion of appreciation, please? And then when Marcia has spoken, I want to take a temperature in the room.
Aloha, everyone. As you know, I'm Marcia Fithian. And Reverend Tim, we want you to know that when it came to the 81st anniversary this year, I was not here last year for the 80th. An aunt of mine had died on the Big Island. So I promised the board, Joanne and Thomas, and everybody on the board, that I would purposely try to make our 81st anniversary a very, very special time, okay? And with that, we not only had a luau, but we had Kahu Aaron Mahi come in and bless our church. Because like everybody else, I was tired of hearing all the talk, and I call it the coconut wireless. At that time, you had not decided to go, and many people had given their time. Many people here, like the Royal Hawaiian Band, Kimo and Leilani Kahono, and many others, free. We paid for the food, and we paid for the typical Hawaiians. Without Joanne and Thomas and all the others that stepped in to help us get that night ready, it took a lot. But we wanted to make it very, very special. And Bev and our other precious person, all of us that jumped in and wanted to bless this church so that we would no longer have this kind of situation. I was born and raised on the Big Island, and I was raised in a Hawaiian family. Just one more minute. Okay, one more minute. And I know what it takes to bless everything. Our reverend, our church, our board, and all the people that stood up that night, and all those hundreds of hours to get this where it needed to be. And therefore, I say God bless all of you. Reverend Tim, I wish you the best. You had not decided to go at that time, and we wanted to show you the aloha spirit. And I believe with the Royal Hawaiian Band and everybody else that night, we showed the people the aloha spirit of Unity Church of Hawaii. Thank you very much.
Let us not mistake that a blessing didn't indeed get bestowed on this community in deep and amazing ways, because we now stand at an outcome that we feel was unexpected. That energy was not spread through this place for loss, but indeed for deep and rich blessings that will continue to unfold in this community. And while many of us don't like it at this moment, spiritual principle says even the difficult circumstances are rich blessings if we will but wrestle with the angel until we hold the blessing in our hands. Are you up for angel wrestling with me in the coming weeks? Thank you. Okay. Anne, you haven't spoken yet, please.
Hi, my name is Anne, and this is very difficult for me right now. I just want to take responsibility for who I am and what I feel I need to bring to the community. I know I took a class with Reverend Levitt, Eye of the Storm, was that what it was called, Reverend Levitt? And it talked to us about speaking from our experience and what triggers us and how we can go back into our shadow self and do the work. And how the gentleman who wrote the book, Gary Simmons, is that correct? Brilliant man, a unity minister, and how it is a requirement for each member of his congregation to take that class, because it teaches us to take individual responsibility for ourselves. It teaches us not to gossip, not to triangulate. And so as a community, we can come together and take responsibility for ourselves, not to gossip. And if someone is gossiping with us, we can, in a loving way, put our foot down and remind each other of the principles that we learned in that book. So I don't know if that's something that we might consider as we continue to do the work individually and as a congregation. So I just wanted to put that out. In alignment with that, I wanted to speak of my personal experience that I had less than a couple weeks ago. Reverend Tim called a senior ministers meeting, and in that meeting he shared, due to the prodding of one of our congregants, specifically what happened with him, because previously in church he talked about, I wrote it down in my notes, that there were horrible things happening here. And I wanted to know specifically what horrible things are happening, like many of us want to know. And so when Reverend Tim called that meeting, and due to Salim's request and being very adamant about specifically what happened, Reverend Tim shared with us how he was threatened to be thrown down the stairs, threatened to be grabbed by the neck, threatened to have his arm broken. I was shocked to hear that coming from him. And so I went over to our board president, Joanne, and I shared with her how surprised I was to hear that. And immediately with my conversation with her, she started to brush it off, saying things like, this person who allegedly did it is 5'2". Do you think she really could have? And then our conversation got broken off. Because Joanne had to come up here and make an announcement. And then we came back and started talking together. And she was saying a few other things, and I thought, it sounds like she doesn't believe Reverend Tim, but I don't want to make up any stories, so I need to ask her. So I did. I said, so do you not believe Reverend Tim? And she shook her head adamantly, and she said, I don't believe it. I don't believe it happened. And my heart was broken, and I was horrified that our president didn't believe Reverend Tim. And I didn't know the specifics other than what Reverend Tim shared with me about what happened, and I know it's very complicated, but I felt like I asked her if anything else was done, and she said that she just went to the person who allegedly did it, and this person said no, and then that was the end of it. And it just made my heart really, really sad. I don't know who else knew about it. I don't know any other members of the board. And I went to Reverend Tim. I said, Reverend Tim, I just talked with Joanne, and she said that she didn't believe you. And, you know, this is so hard for me, guys. I love uplifting people, and I love, seeing the good in each other. I'm really, really good at that. And this is hard for me to say, I love Joanne so much. Joanne has so many gifts that only she has. And she's done tremendous things in the past. She's doing tremendous things now. And she's going to do incredible things in the future. I know that sometimes things are hard. This is hard right now. But I know together we can do the hard things, and we can grow, and we can support, and we can love. And I really believe that. And Joanne, you know that I love you so much. I just don't know how many members of the board knew about this. How many of them didn't believe him without, I don't know what else could have been done, but I just felt like this deserved more than what I was told happened. And I apologize if I'm offending anyone. It is not my intention. I'm just speaking from my experience, and I'm hoping together that we can be real and honest and loving, most importantly, coming from a loving place. But also, to me, coming from a loving place is providing a safe environment for our minister. You know, someone from the board just said that it wasn't a safe place. And we know all these people are leaving, so we need to work together. We need to do something differently, because what we've been doing up to this point isn't working. So that's the only reason why I'm here. I'm getting out of my comfort zone. I'm coming up here in a place of love, guys, honestly, in a place of adoration for Joanne and what she's doing, the entire board for what they're doing. And let's just help each other to do better. That's all I want. Let's help each other to do better. We can do this. I'm excited because I feel like, for myself, coming out here and talking with you and other people, we're doing things differently than we never have before. So I'm willing to do things differently. And that gives me hope that together we can come together and support each other and do things differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I had said I would take the temperature in the room, so I'm going to pause and do that. I recognize that there are speakers who wish to come to the microphone. Can somebody tell me what time it is? 3:10. Take a breath with me. Breathe into that space where you are willing to be present to all the truth. Breathe into that space where you can receive it without judgment for another. Breathe into that space where you can receive it without judgment for yourself. For when we can stand in the emotion of love together, we can be out of our comfort zone, as Anne calls her experience just now. We can move forward in unity. The unity that says this community is important to us. The unity that says every single individual in this community is important to us. Breathe. Be willing to be present to all of the truth that exists. And so it is. So we have people who still have the desire to express, and we've been here for 2 hours. I'm seeking your will as we move forward, because I so understand this community will have a very difficult time moving forward if we are not open with one another. And yet, people who have been referred to in anonymous ways today may not feel safe in this room to own their behavior at this moment. But if we flush through the rumors to at least enough facts, we may begin the process of trust, because your board has sat in this room and received every question and every raw emotion. Breathing into my heart, while they sit with their own raw emotions and questions and wonderings. How do we move forward in wholeness? So as we seek to do that, are we ready for a few more questions or comments? Thank you. Pat.
I don't have I don't have a question, but I just need to say my piece. Following what Jim said, I too came from religious science. And I've seen so many changes in this church, and I started coming to Unity back in 1982. And I was attending religious science at the same time. Every single time there's a change in minister, everything else changes. There were always headbutting, people dividing between them and us. Why, with the minister that went and the minister that came on. And it happened both in Unity and in religious science. Religious science, and I'm not going to go on to religious science, sorry. Anyway, I too am in Jim's position. I'm a member of this church, but I hear everything third, fourth, fifth down the line. So all of this other stuff that's going on behind the scenes just makes me think of the film Frankenstein, where the mob goes running through the town with pitchforks and they're ready to burn down the castle. Because this is what it sounds like. We're going through this again. And I'm telling you how many Sundays I just want to say, I don't want to come back here. I'm tired of this. This is not what the church is about. I read what the Unity principles are. I read the daily word. I also read the religious science daily word as well. And I look at what's going on here and I say, where are we practicing what we preach? Why aren't people practicing what we're reading every day? Isn't this the whole point that we're here? I'm not happy listening to all this crap. Yes, there's them and us. Well, there always will be a them and us. And of course, the reflection of this government that we've been living under and previously, it divides the country. And the division is right in this church as well. So we've got to stand at a higher level and work out these issues. We can't keep going through this every 2 years. And I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it because I'm losing my patience and I'm losing interest in coming to church. Other than to serve with wonderful Elaine, who's our volunteer leader extraordinaire. She's just a wonderful woman, and I love serving with her, and I love volunteering here. But hearing all this other stuff, really, people, we're adults. Let's just start to work out our problems amongst each other, not have to have the pitchforks and find somebody to blame. We're all to blame. Every single one of us. If we're not working out if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. Let's get things moving. Thank you.
Chris.
I'm going to keep this brief, but I do have to address that. When people characterize this as a mob with pitchforks, I think that's disingenuous, okay? Because some of us have gone to meetings, we've been here for years, we have observed the patterns that are going on, and this is really happening. We have used the Unity principles, we have prayed, we have meditated, we have tried to work with people, and the patterns still exist. So to say that we should not speak about this and try to do something about it when there's an actual problem, I find very disturbing. And you also talk about how many members, were leaving because of this. How many members do you think this church has already lost? Do you have any idea? How many people don't come here because of the behavior of certain board members? Because they don't want to be around the energy, they don't want to be around this whole thing that goes on, okay? Now, my other issue is when I came up here before, well, actually, I have to say one thing first, and I have to say this, Ricky, I really do not appreciate it. Comments were made to me, Should I really come up here and ask more questions, because this will be my 4th time? I understand that. I don't think I'm asking anything that people are not interested in, and I'm happy to not ask anymore if that's not appropriate. But to be discouraged from a board member, you completely discouraged me, Ricky. Twice. I don't think I'm being inappropriate. I am not mischaracterizing it.
So just stay with your point,
disagree.
Chris.
We can disagree on that. But
Just stay with your point, Chris.
This is not the first time that I have been discouraged from asking questions by board members. The whole reason I came up here was not for any of this. I came up here because I did ask questions of the board and no one answered. Why is that? Which questions? I said, that with all the evidence, when you can ask the staff members, when you can ask the organizations that work with this church how the church is doing, what's going on, have you not asked them those questions? I mean, when you see people resigning, and oftentimes because they have felt belittled or berated or abused, I don't understand the disconnect there. And I had 3 things there. It was, Tim crying in the meeting and saying specifically, I'm not happy. My wife is not happy. If this doesn't change, I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do. That's pretty clear. It wasn't, I don't know why that's a mystery. And there was one other one. Let's see, staff members, Tim, and the broader question. Do we, as a community, not know the difference between what is appropriate and what is not appropriate? Do we have to have Unity National School tell us that? Yeah, I'm sorry, Unity Worldwide Ministries. Or are we not capable of looking at this and saying, this is inappropriate, it's inappropriate in a leadership position, what do we do about it?
Well, I'll take them in order. First was the part about the board. I want to point out that David Tasaka gave a report where he went through and talked to a number of people who used to come to this church. I am presuming that he was a neutral third party. Okay, whatever it was, let me say what he reported. He reported that he went to the people who left the church. They did not mention board contention as a problem. That's number one. Number two, what they actually said was, there is a small group that likes to run the church and so on, and they felt as if they were thrown under the bus, I think was the phrase he used. Okay, why haven't we talked to staff members? The reason we have not talked to staff members is that Tim has made it very clear that he is the CEO of the staff, and we are not to go around him to talk to staff. Whether he has conducted exit interviews, I do not know. I do know that when it was our responsibility, because Tim resigned, we did assign 2 board members who were Jan Fitzgerald and Jerry Denton. And I forgot to thank you earlier, Jerry, for all the work you're doing for bringing UWM in. And I forgot to mention Richard Hughes and all the work that he did on the election procedures. Everybody has been working very hard. They conducted a 90-minute exit interview. We are awaiting their report. So when it was our Kuleana, we did it. Whether it was when it was Tim's, I don't know. He did not share it with us, I can tell you that. He did not share. Lisa, who has faithfully served this for 4 decades, is resigning, and during my exit interview, this is what she said: we have never received that report. Whether it was done, I don't know. As I feel like the question about Tim crying and saying my wife and I are unhappy, I feel like I've already answered that, but I will answer it again. That was brought up in executive session on in an open session on Thursday. I met with Tim the following Wednesday, as I normally do, and I said that belongs in an executive session because it's personnel or legal. Do you want me to call an executive session? He never asked for an executive session to address those matters. Whether I should have been more proactive and insisted on one, I'll take the ding for that. But I had made it clear that if he wanted one, and as often as he wanted one, I would call one. Okay. In terms of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, Chris uses terms appropriate and non-appropriate. To me, I know that's what he's saying, but what I'm hearing is I have the right to be judgmental, and I can judge you. And I don't think that that's necessarily the principles of unity, and that's why I'm suggesting that we wait till unity gets here and teaches us how to handle conflict rather than taking it on our own. I don't think that taking it our own and judging what's appropriate and not appropriate has served us well. You know, we went through, the board originally eliminated 3 members of the board, only to find out that that was illegal. So then, rather than quiescing, in my opinion, and you're getting my opinion, rather than quiescing and saying, gee, as a board, we don't really have the authority to take them off the board, they decided to call a meeting of the entire membership. To me, that was more fanning flames rather than quiescing. So, as I've indicated, there have been people who have come to me on the board and they have been very, very unhappy, and they have wanted to resign. And my response to them has always been to look them in the eye and as calmly and as lovingly as I can say, you were elected for a 3-year term. Let's work together. And as people, the board members who have reported, things are getting better. We are working together. We're learning how to work together. We're learning how to disagree in respect. And this is not an easy time for us either. Yeah, this is not an easy time for us. I was supposed to be rolling into getting ready for the annual meeting, rolling into the next round of evaluations for Tim, and now this is a whole other thing to deal with. This hasn't been easy for any of us. But I really think that the board has worked very hard to try and understand each other and to try and to listen to each other. And as I said, Jan brought up even more procedures that we could do to help us, like get documents early and so on and so forth. So we're learning and growing too. Okay, I guess I've rambled enough.
Ricky?
I think it's that one, yeah. I'm supposed to. Do I use this one?
Oh, yeah, Ricky, please. Here,
Can I use this one?
Sure.
Okay. First off, Chris, I want to publicly apologize to you. Nothing I said to you when I was standing in line was meant to discourage you at all. But since you brought it up in front of the whole congregation, I'm going to share with everyone what I said to you, and something that you don't know. When I got in line, I took my hand and put it on Chris's back and rubbed his back and said, I hear you. I know you're really passionate, and you're really passionate. I was trying to be empathic. And then I leaned down a little bit later and said something like quickly, I was trying to make a joke, but people that know me know I have a dry sense of humor. So I said, do you know this is your 4th time? May I ask, are you going to be brief for a long time? What he didn't know, the reason for my asking is I work on Sundays, and I work on deadlines, and I'm supposed to be at work right now, so that's why I was asking him. So I publicly apologize to you. I wasn't meaning to discourage you in any way. So I have no problems apologizing if somebody thinks I screwed up. But the reason I got up here, and I will be brief, Margie, I'm going to use an HR analogy because that's what I know best professionally. In the HR world, if
And I worked for the U.S. Postal Service for many years, and I developed their workplace violence prevention program for 3/4 of their districts nationwide. So I know about threats and all that stuff. I put the systems together and led command centers and teams. Typically in the HR world, if there's an incident, the people are trained, the employees or whomever, are trained to report the incident promptly. Management has no obligation to do anything until it's reported to them. So it's kind of like we can't do anything about something we don't know because we don't know what we don't know. As soon as it's reported to management, whether it's true or not, management then has to do, as you know, in the legal world, a rational, formal, what we call investigation, where we interview or check in with both parties. However, the caveat, even at the Postal Service, and you all know the Postal Service had a lot of issues. If somebody brought an incident to us that was number one, it's an alleged incident, and I want everybody here to begin to think of any allegations toward anybody as alleged, because we don't know what happened. If it was over a year old or if it was old, we couldn't really do anything. I mean, we could sit and talk to the parties. We could have a conversation one-on-one. We could even do what we called an intervention, where we got the two parties in a room and got them talking to sort of explore, but we couldn't do anything because the incident was so old. So what is my point? My point is, I'm still on the board. I've wanted to quit a few times, but I haven't quit, because I still believe we have a lot of talents here, and I know everybody's in this room because you love unity principles. That's our common thread. We are all here because we love unity principles. So my question to all of us, myself included, is, are we willing to take a step back and stand in the place, in that empty container, where we create new space for the love we all have, for the wonderful people that each of us are in our own right, to find solutions and to build connections. Margie or somebody, I don't know who it was, somebody mentioned about trust. A lot of us don't speak up because there isn't trust. And when there's not trust, here's what I do. I go like this. I want to run. So I'm very interested in us, each of us. It doesn't matter whether you agree with me. I want to get to know you. But I want you to get to know me. I don't want to make a snap judgment about you. I don't want you to make a snap judgment about me before you get to know me. So let's get to know each other a little bit better and stop all this, what I call standing in the muck and the quicksand. We're better than this, and we're bigger than this, and we're all here still because we love unity. So let's turn the church around. We can do this together. As Hillary Clinton said, I hope none of you hate her, but if you do, that's okay too. But she had a campaign slogan, stronger together. We're stronger together. We're not stronger separately. So let's work together to pull ourselves not just forward, but upward. Is everybody in favor of that? Raise your hand. Who's in favor of getting back to unity principles? Thank you.
You could either stand, Bev, or the one that Joanna's holding.
This will be fast. I appreciate some people don't share that often. So I appreciate when it's difficult to come up and share. I appreciate hearing from people I don't hear from too often, Pat. But I have my perspective on how I feel, and Pat shared hers. So that's her feeling, and I don't think I have the right to tell her that's a wrong feeling to feel, or that's a wrong thing to experience. She gave the analogy of pitchfork and Frankenstein. That's her personal experience. Thank you for sharing it, and I don't think we have the right to tell her that that's wrong or inappropriate for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Eric?
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, thank you, Margie, for facilitating this today. And I also want to thank whoever prepared the list of questions that we're talking about today, because I think that this entire conversation has been helpful and healing. And my question is, what are the other questions on the list? Because it seems like there's a lot of...
I'll tip you later,
this is a
Eric.
conversation that needs to be continued.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there are two more questions on the, at least three more questions on the list that was provided by Salim Ahmed that was gathered amongst your community, fellow community members. But I'm betting that the next two people standing wish to address the current topic, and I'm going to allow that. And then, since there's nobody in line behind you two, then we are moving on to question number 3, or taking temperature. And so thank you, Eric, for inviting us to have forward motion. Tim?
Am I still on? Yeah, thank you. I love you all. Thank you for hanging out for so long. Wow. And I know, dinner's coming soon, we hope. So lots of different points of view, and I think it's very important to have these different things expressed and have a means of us communicating. Just want to state that there's 2 different board members that have both spoken in our meeting today that I tried to tell. I tried to tell what was happening. One of them said, I don't want to hear about it. Okay? That includes Ricky. Ricky said, I don't want to hear about it. So, I also tried to bring it up with Joanne. Now, I understand that there are ways I could have done this better, and looking back on it, I can see some ways I could have done this better. I could have documented it, written it, first talk, which I did, with the individual involved, and then if that didn't work, take it to the whole board. Then if that didn't work, take it to UWM, and if that didn't work, take it to the police. So now it's much more clear. And any of you who've been in a situation where you've been verbally or emotionally abused, did you know what to do always right at the moment? Sometimes it took a while. And so I just want to say that I agree that we all need to work together. We need to listen. And I think that's very important. I don't, being an advocate for those who've been abused, and I've never liked it when they end up being accused for not telling someone soon enough. That's kind of a switch. But I want each one of you to know that I love you, and that I appreciate you. I'll always carry you in my heart. And I know that this church is going to progress. This board, this church, it's all going to progress. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that. Tim, I have 2 pieces of paper I'd like to have you sign, please. These 2 pieces of paper that I'm asking him to sign are an indication that the board members will hold information confidential. And that has been promised to the school, and I'm asking him to sign 2 originals, one we will keep with the board secretary and one that we'll file with the school, indicating that the board is very clear that we need to keep their information confidential. The reason that I bring it up is that when I arrived today, I was also asked to sign a piece of paper, which is from the Office of the Senior Minister of Unity Church of Hawaii. And in paragraph 3, it says, this memorandum is your formal warning that a police report was filed on January 16th, 2019 with the Honolulu Police Department, report number 19021515. This is the first time that I had heard anything about this. And as Tim just indicated, the staff never came to me, or what, I have no idea what this is about. And it says, the petition to comply with our community standards will result in a range of protective actions and measures to include, but not limited to, obtaining a restraining order, filing a criminal report with the Honolulu Police Department for harassment, terroristic threatening, and assault. So, Jan opened by talking about where is our consciousness, and will the consciousness solve the problems or make it worse? If the staff has a problem, we need to be given permission to talk to the staff. We need a group meeting to have this. We need to get an understanding. I don't think that the first thing, one of the first recourses, is to file a police report without the people even knowing about this. Okay? I have never had an indication that that staff felt that way. A phone call would have been lovely. A conversation would have been lovely. And I think that is in part what's really tearing this church apart, is that we would rather run to third parties and file a report than do the difficult task of sitting down. I mean, if someone said to me, I'd like to throw you down the stairs, I would say, whoa, what triggered that? Can we sit down and talk? Right? And that event happened, and as far as we can tell, in 2017. Okay, next person. Did you sign those so I can file them?
My name is Francine, and I've been a member of this church for many years. And I want to, first of all, thank everyone today who spoke from their heart. That's a very difficult thing to do, and I understand that, and I thank you. It has supported me in coming up and saying what I'm going to say, which is nothing, awful or really important. But I just want the congregation to know that we are here to do our work. And our work means that at a meeting like this, we all get involved and all get fired up. But we have to know that the long road is not as fiery or as, it's just hard work. And you do it every day. And if you need to have a spiritual practice to, get you on your way, that's why you come to this church. At least that's why I came. I needed help in forming a pattern that I could follow, and that has given me true strength in what I believe. And the rest of, I've heard several people today say that everything will be okay when UWM gets here. I understand that we need their expertise, but when they get here, we need to be present. We need to be present to listen to what they have to say and to ask more questions of them. And that's where our work comes in, and that can be real dreary work. To have to form your question, to have to stand in front of people and ask it. And it's really important that we remember that we are the congregation, and we are here on a religious or a holy purpose. And that is what matters, at least it does to me. And I've spoken to other people in the congregation, and that's what matters to them. We know what our principles are. We know where to find them. We know how to express them. And now we have to act on them. So I thank you, and I thank those people who spoke from their heart. I really appreciate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. Judy?
Hey. Aloha, my name is Judy. So there's a few things I wanted to just ask questions about in one comment. I have a question about, my understanding is Reverend Tim is leaving February 17th. I have also heard that Unity Worldwide Ministry will not be able to react that quickly. So between the time that Reverend Tim leaves and we have empty period, what will be the procedure as far as the running of the church? And I'm wondering if we could get that outlined and if we could get that presented to the congregation. Since the congregation is above the board, I think it would be helpful for us to buy into whatever procedures and policies that you view that you're going to be putting into place. No, you don't need to address it now. In fact, you don't even need to address it today, I think. Okay. The other thing is, it would be helpful for me and others, all of us, to have a sense of safety, a sense of what I say will not be held against me, what I say will not be talked about and really be, if someone has a problem, and I think this has been said, you should address it to the person you're having a problem with. And sometimes when it's two individuals, it would be helpful for both individuals to get together with you if you need to get to the bottom of it. Sometimes that's not possible, but I think that's a wise thing. The third thing is in our bylaws, under board duties, the third thing there is that the board members shall support and respect the senior minister. What I would ask of the board individually, all members of the board individually, is for you to ask that question to yourself. I don't need to hear the answer, but you really need to answer that question for yourself. If you cannot answer it affirmatively, then I think you need to go to Reverend Tim and have that discussion. All of you should anyway, as board members, because obviously there is a disconnect. And neither side is better or worse. We're all in this together. We want to heal this community. We want this community to be the shining beacon it can and has been. So let's take some responsibility ourselves. The last thing is I just loved today's daily word. The scripture from today's daily word was perfect. Let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. And so what that means to me is there's been a lot of sweet words that have been said today. Let us see the result. Let us see the action. And if right now we are not feeling it, and we know what that feels like, when we can feel the energy and the rightness of it, it means that things have been communicated, it means there has been right action, and it means that we can move forward as a community.
Thank you, Judy. Chip.
Doc gave me his place here so I could get up here and say a word. I really like what Judy just said about it. We set up about the progress that's going on or not going on, and numbers drive the game. So whatever we say is core, it's critical, that's a critical goal for us to improve our communication, we better have some tools that come from the communication community by people that know how to communicate. And I'm not talking about the church back east. I'm talking about people sitting in here that can teach it overnight to you. But if there's no way to measure that our communication is effective, what Judy just said is right. That action won't happen. It will not happen, I'll guarantee you. The only other thing I'd ask you, question-wise, is what 2, 3, 4 values does the board operate by? Does this church operate by? Does anybody know what those values are? 2, 3, 4 of them? And that's my point. You have no way to hold each other accountable for not attacking that minister if you don't have 2, 3, 4 words that are guide words that say we don't talk to each other like that. Excuse me, everything comes to a halt until this gets resolved now. Not next week, now. In the board meeting. Okay? So let me just close with another question. When will you build your strategy, board?
Thank you, Chip.
Okay. First of all, I think we may lead with an area where we could all support this. We have been engaged in discussions with UWM about them coming in and doing this months-long process. It became pretty clear very early that there will be a gap between February 18th and whenever they can come in, because they have to find specialists willing to come to Hawaii 4 months, and they have already indicated that this has not been easy because it's very remote for them. So there will be a gap. We have identified a minister who is willing to come in and fill that gap on a week-to-week basis. Should I mention? No? Okay. It is someone who's familiar with the church and who's experienced with the church. We have formally written UWM and asked them for permission to hire this person to come in. This is a person who is at a very senior level. So that is our strategy, is to bring in someone who has been trained to do transitional work, who has several decades of experience as a minister. That's the strategy. And as Chip indicated at the end, when we find out when they should leave, their initial strategy is, and when we finish in 9 months or whenever it was, then you will start the search process, which, as we know, takes at least 4 months. I am hoping to negotiate with them, and I have already expressed my concern that I think there should be overlap between the last several months. In other words, once they know we think the healing should be done in November, February, whatever it is, a few months in advance, that's when we gear up, we get our application packet ready, we form our search teams and so on, because in my mind, and I could be naive, but in my mind, the ideal situation is that when they leave, having provided support for that, let's say 9 months, because we don't know, that the next thing we're doing is hearing from ministerial candidates so that we are reassured that we'll be constantly under the presence of a senior minister to the very best of our ability. And who knows, maybe we can bring the person who's coming in the beginning, coming in at the end. But the point is, the board will work on a strategy so that we're not adrift and that we don't have to make up something from the board to figure out how we're going to administer this church. I think it's far wiser to have someone who's used to dealing in these kinds of situations than for us to kind of do it on the fly. I'm not a senior minister. I don't know anyone else on the board who's a senior minister. So I think that's the best thing for us to do. In terms of support of the ministry, I think we do support the ministry and the senior minister, and people may not agree with that. But I think also we pass policy. And as Donna Johnson said when she came here, policy and strategic direction is set by the board, and that becomes the marching orders for her as the head of the CEO of UWM. And it should be, in my opinion, the marching orders for the senior minister here. So it's a dialogue back and forth, and it's hopefully one where you work together to move forward. And one of the reasons that we're in trouble with the Attorney General is because we have been asking for months, We have passed repeated motions to get data from the school. And people say, well, no, they've supplied it, but I have asked third-party neutrals. The auditor gave a list of the data that was remaining. There were minutes that I had to provide, so I provided the minutes, and everything else on those items were items from the school. Okay? So we need support both ways. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Tom, you've been waiting, and you haven't had a chance to speak yet. Do you wish to take a turn to speak?
I'm not real sure. I'm not real sure whether I'm ready to speak.
Okay.
I've got apologies to make, though. I've got apologies to make to Reverend Tim, because my shadow has told me I have not supported him and protected him the way I needed to. I'm sorry. He has told us numerous times he was hurting. We have done things from the board standpoint of saying, you don't even get a chance to give a president's report this time because last time you spoke up and you stirred up the mess enough. You stirred up emotion to the point that it made the meeting difficult. I apologize that I did not stand up and say, this is totally inappropriate. Asking Reverend Tim not to stay at an executive session that has to do with things that were about him and about a job description so that we could talk about it without him present is totally inappropriate. I apologize. To staff, I apologize. I apologize to Judy, wherever you are, to Lisa, to the rest, Alethea. Even though my heart was with them, and I love them dearly, and I wanted to do everything I could do, I didn't do as much in the board meeting of being able to support them as I could have. Having said that, we've got a lot of growth to do on the board. We've got a lot of growth to do in the church. We can do it. Now is a perfect time to be able to do that. And the reason that it's a perfect time is we're all hurting to the degree that we're ready to open up our hearts and allow our hurts to heal. And to answer Chip's question, we did do some of this work with the disc a year and a half ago, and we made cue cards that were on our desks that told each other what it was that we promised each other that we would do and we would not do. Those worked pretty well for about 2-3 months until we kind of lost putting them on the desks every time. And so, Chip, thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that back up to our attention. I will try not to be quiet. I will try not to sit back. And I will try not to let my shadow, even as a physician, to say, keep quiet, don't ruffle the feathers, let things lie. Because a lying dog is easier than trying to put up with a bulldog that's on your leg. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Ricky?
I'd like to publicly thank Thomas. I'm really moved. I'm really moved. Thank you, Thomas, for what you just shared. As Jan said earlier today, where is Jan? There you are. And thank you for facilitating, Jan. As Jan said earlier today, memory can be deceptive. Reverend Tim, I don't remember saying that to you. But if I did say that to you, it wasn't my place. Nobody asked me to do any investigation about anything, and I usually defer everything to you. I know you get a lot on your plate, but if somebody rolls the ball to me, I roll it to her as board president to look into. So, and as far as your comments about being sensitive to abusers, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and had a private practice for many years, and I specialized in working with incest and people that have been abused in alcoholic families. So I know a whole lot about abusers. And one thing I'd like to segue that comment onto to us is I think we're all in pain. At least I'm just speaking for me. My perception is we're all hurting. But I want to go back to what I said before. We're all here because we love unity principles. And Thomas, I think you just said, we can do this. We can heal this, but we need to start loving each other. We need to love each other through this. And we need to begin to build trust, because if I don't feel trust with you, I'm not going to talk with you as deeply as I could. And if you don't feel trust with me, you're not going to talk with me. So I want us to find ways together to build trust. We can do this. We're here. Look at all these people in this room that care. We all care. So let's start finding new ways to build trust, please. I love unity principles. And I came here because Maya Angelou said that unity rocked. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for her, I think I'll look into it. So let's work together to build those bridges. Words build worlds. And we change the world one conversation at a time. And I am challenging all of us, myself included, starting from this moment on, to have better, more conversations with each other. Thank you.
A moment.
If it's is it the Laos? Okay. If it's the Laos, Kathy was going to give the presentation on the school. Are there parents other than the Laos that are here? Because she was just going to read from the letter that she wrote to the Laos. And I'll be happy to spread she made copies. I'll be happy to distribute them. But I am not in a position to speak beyond that to those issues.
So does that mean we're tabling that conversation as a whole for another session? Joanne, did I interpret that correctly, or are you suggesting you'll pass out this information that you have at hand right now, but otherwise we're tabling the preschool discussion for another session?
Yes, we can. We were intending to do these board talks every week, so we could do it. Well, I don't know how many people want to come on Super Bowl. 2. Okay, so starting the week after Super Bowl, every week.
Thank you. How we doing? I'm doggone hungry.
One at a time. Sally, please.
The 3 questions have to do with the preschool. They are, what was the rationale for asking the Unity Preschool to share with the board confidential information pertaining to salaries and 401k accounts of school teachers? The note is Kathy will address this. Why were the parents of Unity Preschool students asked to sign a consent form to share confidential information to Unity Church and reportedly threatened through a November 20th, 1918 letter that if they do not sign this consent form, their children will not be able to renew or continue their enrollment at Unity Preschool? As a result, we understand that a number of parents are looking to remove their children from our Unity Preschool. And the last question is, for several years now, there has always prevailed a loving working relationship between the church and the preschool. What brought about this significant change? I think this is an important topic and certainly of concern to the parents who are present and many others, and perhaps all of you if you've been touched by the activity of the preschool here on this campus. Joanna's suggesting that we take up this particular issue. What's the day week after Super Bowl?
February 10th.
Thank you, February 10. Are we in accord? Yes. It conflicts with the chaplain meeting. Okay. Okay. So some may opt to be at the chaplain meeting, which we have planned for that data. Yes, in the back of the room? Yes. Okay. We'll try and figure out an amenable solution to be announced. Jerry?
I'm Jerry Denton. I'm one of the board members. Jan Fitzgerald, the other board member, and I are going to be setting up a liaison committee to work with the preschool. And it's our intention to be able to work with them and help understand what their side of what's going on so that we can help facilitate a higher level of communication. Unfortunately, I won't be here the 10th. I'll be in California. But I'm hoping that Jan and I will have had a chance to at least begin those communications and that conversation between now and then.
I think it's clear we have a full calendar of church activities in the coming weeks and months. And I'm going to just say it will be our intent to make that session available to as many people as have interest to be there. There's one person standing. Richard, please.
Richard loves to
And then may we feel complete for today, just for today.
Thank you. You know, there's a lot of dynamics here that have been happening today, and I think they're all good. Everything of our past is a blessing moving forward. We do have to recognize the blessings, okay? We had a wonderful sermon, a message from Reverend Tim today. Thank you so much for everything about the shadow. Is this on? Okay. So that shadow work is, to me, very important. And with the expression, the emotions, some call it venting, that's fine. It's all good. We need to do that. Although my thought about the meeting here today was more about sharing information. So maybe we need to do both, and I don't know if it should be in the same venue. But there's a lot of information, I think, that the board could have relayed to the congregation or the people here that hasn't really been touched on. So I look forward to a similar community talk kind of thing, but I understood it would be board talk, okay? So this is a little different for me. It caught me a little bit by surprise, but I am interested in hearing and taking the pulse of what's happening here. But what it comes down to, again and again and again, from so many other people, is that finger pointing does not solve the problem. And the message that we had today is work on the shadow. And I think that's so important. It's about taking personal responsibility. So I really look forward to this opportunity. Tim leaving is really focusing on the pattern or the issues of the past, and we need to break that pattern. We all agree on that. Has it been a fun ride? Not really. But we have incredible potential, and it is a spiritual community, and we do need a spiritual answer when doing shadow work. So let's point the fingers at our own shadows and really do that work. And one point I heard Reverend Tim make today is that a lot of churches, or he said religions, don't actually get into that kind of work. But that's why unity is here. So let's all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, take a breath. And honor that spirit of wholeness, willingness, and receptivity that came to life today in this community. Honor that spirit of wholeness, compassion, and love that is alive in you. That we tap into a deep well of truth, of God's presence, available to us as strength, wisdom, divine guidance, and courageous action as we move forward through difficult conversations that we are still heart to heart, hand to hand in this community, holding a space for those who need further healing, holding a space for our own receptivity and willingness to step into that shadow work so that we may come out the other side free, whole, answering the divine call of our souls. For we are here to do this amazing work together. We are here to change ourselves, to transform this community, so that we stand as a light of potential in the world. Touch your heart. If this is the call of your heart, say yes. If this is the call of your heart, say yes. And so it is. And so we call it to be from this moment forward. Amen. And give yourselves a hand. Hallelujah.